this podcast, we will be looking at storytellers, stories, and the reasons that oral storytelling is important in our world today. You would think with all the technology we have available that stories do not have a place anymore, but they are needed more than ever. For in storytelling is where we find truth, we find reality, and we find the heart of what it is to be human. Welcome to the heart of storytelling. My name is Alyssa Curtain, and let's go on an adventure. Welcome to this week's episode. This week we are speaking with Elena Asciutti, who is in Italy, and I met Elena at the Feast Mentorship earlier in 2023, and we were co-mentees, and it seems like we have very similar interests and in fairy tale and in storytelling, and she has her own storytelling show as well. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Elena. Welcome to this week's episode. Today we are speaking with Elena Asciutti. Is that right?
Asciutti, it's okay.
Asciutti, sorry, from Florence in Italy. And so tell me how you got your start in storytelling.
Thank you very much, Alyssa, for inviting me to this podcast. And of course, you are touching at a topic which is very dear to my heart. So basically, the exact moment was when I was in Catania, which is in Sicily, the place I come from, southern part of Italy. And I was there visiting my parents for Christmas because at that time I was living somewhere else abroad. And I went to a storytelling performance. And there was this storyteller, an amazing storyteller whose name is Gaspare Balsamo, who was standing alone in the middle of a room, which used to be a classroom, and starting telling a Sicilian legend called Cola Pesce, Cola, Nick, the fish. And I found it that powerful. And it's a legend that everybody knows in Sicily, but the way Gaspare was telling it struck me a lot. And I said, I want to do that. Of course, it was introverted common. I knew that I could not be a storyteller full time. Indeed, I'm a storyteller, but part time. I will tell you more why. And so at that time, I used to live in Brussels. And when I went back to Brussels, I looked for a school where I could start learning storytelling. And I did find one. And so I started this, let's say, parcours, and I went to storytelling classes in French, and little by little I learned few techniques. But this is what I recall exactly, that storytelling performance. And then it was, one of these triggering buttons, and my memory went back when I was a child, and I remember my two grandmothers telling me stories and my school teacher telling me stories and fairy tales, very much connected to the city where I live, where at that time I was living, Catania in Sicily, so with a very strong local connection.
Wow. So do you think that that sense of place and the stories from that place helped you with your identity and your sense of self? Do you feel that that's part of that?
Yes, indeed. I feel very much connected to Sicilian fairy tales. And indeed, those are the stories that always comes into my repertoire. Whenever I have to tell a story, I'm invited, or in my radio storytelling show, I always feel that Sicilian fairy tales are the first reference to me. And with them, I've started, of course, a journey, because I've been in contact with several storytellers in Italy, in other contexts. And I try to find the connection of these Sicilian fairy tales with other cultures, because as you know, Alyssa, fairy tales have been traveling around the world. So I feel very much grounded in the Sicilian oral traditions, but at the same time, I consider them a kind of springboard to connect with other fairy tales that have been gifted by other storytellers to me along the years. And what I try when looking at and telling Sicilian fairy tales is about women. I mean, we usually have this idea of the hero very much associated with a man, with a boy, with a gentleman, while I try to look at fairy tales where there is an heroine. And they tell a lot, at least to me, about young ladies, girls, and women that have been, in a way, fighting their way through history. Because, as you know, fairy tales are very symbolic, and they tell us more than what how to say, what their appearance is. So I found this very charming that in the Sicilian fairy tales, there is a lot of elements about resilience of women and the way they have been fighting through male power. And this came to me, of course, very strong while reading Telling, but it came also very strong to me while in a conversation with a very important fabulist who is internationally known. His name is Jack Zipes. And he's very much specialized in studying Sicilian fairy tales. So we had this conversation on how powerful are the heroine appearing in Sicilian fairy tales, despite sometimes Sicilian society is thought to be very, well, it is very patriarchal, but I think with the very relevant example of female heroine that have made it through history.
Yeah, so do you think that young Sicilian girls see that strength when they hear those stories? Does that then reflect in the women in the culture, do you think, the strength and resilience?
First of all, I need to say that fairy tales and storytelling maybe is a genre that in Sicily, and I would say in Italy as such, has been a little bit neglected.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
now
fascinating, because Basile was Italian, you know.
exactly,
So,
exactly. Yes, if we think that Basile and also Giuseppe Pitre have been the first, let's say, collectors in a scientific ways of fairy tales in the world. As Basile, of course, back in the 16th century, Giuseppe Pitre again in Sicily in the 19th century. So even before the Grimm brothers started the entire work, or Perrault itself. But it is very much connected with childhood. So whenever I talk about fairy tales and fiaba, which is the Italian translation for fairy tales, people, they think that I'm usually referring to an audience of adults. So this revival mode, which has been very strong maybe in other countries in Europe and in the world, it has been less effective maybe in Italy. There are several storytellers that are now trying to push it hard into the art performance agenda in Italy, but it's not that evident. So I don't know whether there is this much awareness. Myself, again, with my radio storytelling show, I'm trying to make that point that fairy tales, first of all, are not just for children, but they can be inspirational for adults or for people of any age, actually. And each age will read and listen to the story in a different way, right? According to the moment where each of us stands in his life trajectory. And also make reference to the fact that women have been going through powerful representation in fairy tales. There is always this debate among storytellers. For example, Disney that has proposed like a very sweetened version of Cinderella, for example, of Snow White, which is, I believe, is true. At the same time, we all know that Disney has been a powerful tool to put fairy tales back to the attention of the audience generally. But I think that this is to be continued work from everybody that is interested in storytelling, to put back the fairy tales as a powerful source of inspiration, imagination, surely, but I would say also a quite good dose of reality.
Oh, for sure. So tell me more about the radio show.
Yeah, so basically, the radio show is an idea that sprung into my mind oh wow, almost 4 years ago now. Yes, it was beginning of 2020. I'm working in a university here in Florence, and my work is different from being the storyteller of the university. I'm in charge of international partnership, mobility for students. And at the same time, as I said, I have this part-time inspiration for storytelling. And 4 years ago, there was a call by a group of researchers that had just founded a web radio inside the university. And they were looking for producers because, of course, you need to fill in up the schedule of the radio. And as soon as I got that call on my inbox, I said, that's a good opportunity to look into fairy tales and storytelling through radio. I'm a big fan of radio. I always listen to radio, whatever I'm doing during the day. Especially if I'm alone, I do not disturb anybody, I'm always listening to radio. So I said it's a good way to combine a passion for radio and a passion for storytelling. And then Diffusione Fiaba, this is the name of the radio show, was conceived. Diffusione means broadcast, diffusion. Fiaba, as I said before, is the Italian translation for fairy tales. And basically, I invite storytellers from Italy and around the world. So it's a multilingual show. Italian, French, and English are the most used languages for the moment. And then we go through personal experience of storytellers, as well as interesting debate on contemporary storytelling, a little bit as you have been doing on your podcast. And I also sometimes invite fabulous scholars that are specialized in still studying fairy tales as a literary genre, because there I think that there is a huge potential for studying and interpreting fairy tales. So each of them will bring the anthropologist point of view, for example, also the psychotherapist,
Psychotherapies, yeah.
Yes, aspect of storytelling. Some other will rather stick to the more, as I said, literature point of view of fairy tales. So it's a way indeed to raise awareness about the importance of storytelling nowadays as a form of art, connected very much to fairy tales. Now, some of the storytellers coming to the radio show have been telling life stories, which is something that is becoming an important aspect of storytelling. Some other have been telling, for example, more mythologic legend connected to the Roman or Greek mythology. But I mean, all of them connected with storytelling as a form of art. So yes, where storytelling is meant not reading, not memorizing a story, but telling it through our own images.
Yeah. And so what's your preference? Are you a folk fairy tale lover, or do you do different types of stories? What's your favorite?
My own is very much fairy tales. As I said, I try to give visibility to the Sicilian oral tradition, not excluding. Then there are stories that have been listening through other storytellers, and then they stay with me. And then I say, okay, if they stay with me and they are always visiting me, there is a reason. So I try to bring them to the radio or in other venue and share with people on my own way. I'm very much attracted, as I said before, by fairy tales where the women are the heroines, as well as fairy tales where there are riddles, and fairy tales where you think that the end is bringing somewhere else, but at the end there is this surprise effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how you we find like a niche of stories that we really like, because I've made the decision to not tell animal tales because there's just such a huge bank of stories. If I cut out animals, that's a whole heap of like stories where animals are the main characters. Then I can eliminate a whole heap of stories because there's thousands to choose from and thousands that come and call to you. So it's, yeah, I really like stories with wonder and magic, as well as that sense of truth, I guess, that comes through in the character. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. So do you have a process?
Well, I usually try to note down very keywords, the keywords of the different scenes that I do see in a story. There are other methods. I've been also exposed to the storyboard methods, but maybe because I'm not a fan of drawing, I found it quite wouldn't say hard, but not my cup of tea. So I prefer, to draw the skeleton through keywords from scene 1 to scene 2, and then I try to connect the different scenes. I also try to put inside taste, flavors, sounds when I tell that I think could fit. I try to stick as much as possible to a neutral setting. I don't know, I'm still getting through adaptation of fairy tales to contemporary world. I've been listening to storytellers that have been using, for example, mobiles when they or I don't know, mentioning TVs or cars when telling their stories. That I'm still hesitant to do so. So I try to keep it as neutral as possible. And of course, what is one page of a fairy tales that you can read in 3-4 minutes, when I tell it, it becomes a little bit bigger. So I always stay in between 8, 10, maximum 15 minutes, depend, of course, how many layers, there sometimes in the fairy tales there are many repetition, things that happen 2-3 times. So I try to keep that. I really like, yes, another elements that I really like are repetitions.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
yes, I mean it gives the sense that in life there is routine, right? That
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
to repeat, or challenges that at the first time you are not able to go through, but then at the fourth time you're able to succeed. Voila, so this is what I usually use. Yes, few words, few keywords on a page, and then I rehearsal until I'm satisfied. And I do rehearsal everywhere, while I'm cooking and while I'm walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you obviously tell in English and Italian, or and the other
I use
languages?
I use mainly English and Italian, yes, and sometimes if I have a francophone guest and there is time on the show, I usually use French to tell a story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm
Yeah.
so jealous of the ability of people to speak other languages, because Australians are monolingual. We're not very lucky here in that way. So have you had any special moments in your storytelling experience?
Well, I think that what's I think is very special about storytelling in general is the possibility to connect to many different people and many different words. And I consider this very special. I've been living in different countries in the world, and because mainly of work. And every time I've been going through the storytelling door, I've been in contact with different people, storytellers, of course, and different environments where storytelling has been performed. So it's like an opening door to these very vast universes. I would use the plural. So I consider these very, very special. Then, of course, my first episode of the Diffusione Fiaba, the radio storytelling show that I was mentioned before, I think it was a very emotional moment when I performed firstly in public, which was in Lebanon several years ago. It was special because it was a personal stories event while I brought fairy tales into the audience. So I felt like this gap, this clash, everybody was telling personal life stories and I was not. But in a way, fairy tales, they also talk about our own life stories. We can read through the lines. And then yes, I think this is the special of storytelling, that every time I can live a new experience and meet new people and find this very strong bond to storytelling that we all have. And surely another momentum maybe that I share with you, Alisa, that I felt like if I can picture it, like, like a child that is moving to another age of his life, was this mentorship with the Federation of Asian Storytellers feast that we did participate together. I'm very I do recognize the support that I received by my mentor, Kieran, because I felt that I made a leap in my storytelling practice. I felt so empowered. We spent together in this mentorship program 5-6 months, and I felt that it was that I was walking with someone next to me, giving me encouragement, support, direction, guidance. And so, yes, maybe going back to your question, sorry, I was chaotic in my answering, but yes, maybe this has been an important momentum because of this leap towards feeling empowered in telling.
Yeah, I found the mentorship to be wonderful as well. I think I grew so much in that, not only in my process, but in the telling. I felt a big shift happen in that space. So
Exactly.
when we thinking about story, why do you think that we need storytelling in the world today? Why is it still important?
Well, we need it um, because stories are nutrients. No, how do you say? They they nurture us. So the stories are nurturing us. It is important that we, in a way, we keep telling our stories as love stories, but as well as fairy tales, because there are sediments of years and years, decades, centuries, and millennium of similar emotions and life experience that have connected our ancestors and have showed that there is a path. There is a path to life, a path to love, a path to death, a path to difficulties and challenges, and that everything is possible. So here maybe I would like to mention two elements. The first one is Italo Calvino. Italo Calvino was an Italian writer. and is very well known in the storytelling of fairy tales panorama because he published in 1956 a collection of Italian fairy tales. So he took all the regional fairy tales that had been transcribed in dialects and translated them into Italian. So he made a collection of around 200 fairy tales from dialect to Italian, respecting the different regions that we have in Italy. And the introduction of this anthology, which is of course very precious, it says that fairy tales are true because they do represent the catalog of the different destinies that a man and a woman can give to themselves. So it's a question also of choice. And I really always like to mention this because I really believe that it's a catalog. It's a catalog where humans are shown according different passion, virtues, but also through their vices. And there is what you were saying before, Elisa, that sense of truth is like a compensating. And what is depicted in fairy tales is never a bad and good, black and white, but there are many nuances over there. And so this is the first aspect I wanted to mention. And the second one is the fairy tales coming from the Swahili culture. So it can be many countries of East Africa. And it's called the meat of the tongue.
The meat of the tongue.
Yeah.
Wow.
The meat of the tongue. And I heard this story many years ago in French by a Belgian storyteller. And then I read it in Italian in a collection of fairy tales dedicated to women. And then I read and I started telling in different languages. And then I found it's original. Well, it's original in the sense into inverted comma in English, because this story was collected by Angela Carter, who was notably be a feminist author. So she collected these stories in English. Maybe she had heard before from someone else, we don't know who. Basically, the story is about a king and a queen living together in a magnificent palace. This is the way I imagine it. The king is very powerful and rich, and his wife used to be very beautiful, and now is very thin and pale, and above all, sad. So the king doesn't know what to do because he has tried many ways to bring the wife at the beauty she had when they got married. And one day he finally see a beautiful young lady passing by the garden of his palace. And so he goes down to the garden and asks to the gardeners, who was that? Who was that woman? And the gardener said, that's my wife. Sometimes, once in a while, she comes and brings me food. And then the king said, how is that possible that she's so bright and beautiful and smiling? What's the secret? And the gardener says, well, my lord, my king, it's the meat of the tongue. So the king literally goes into the kitchen and asks the cook to prepare as many dishes as possible with the meat of the tongue to prepare this buffet, this feast the following day for his wife, the queen. But the following day, you can imagine, Alisa, when the queen enters this room full of dishes from tongue of different animals, the cow, the rabbit, and the chicken, etc., and the smells coming out of these dishes, she's just going back into her bedroom. And so the king is again desperate, doesn't know what to do, goes back to the gardener and says, okay, we will do like this. It didn't work. The meat of the tongue with my wife didn't work. So now you will bring my wife, the queen, with you in your hut. She will be living with you for 6 months, and your wife will be coming to the palace with me. They do so, and after 6 months, the queen goes back to the palace. She enters the cabinet of his husband, and she's again beautiful and rosy skin and smiling. And the gardener is following the queen, and he looks around, and at a certain point he sees his wife in a corner, very pale, sad and slim. And finally, the king cannot understand what had happened, because exactly the queen was as beautiful as the gardener wife was 6 months before. So finally, the gardener's wife stands up and starts explaining, saying, you know, my husband, every night after he finishes working for you, my king, he comes back home and starts telling me what he did during the day. And then after that, he will start telling me fairy tales and fantastic stories. And after that, he will start singing and playing music for me. This is the way we spend the night together. And it's only at that moment that the king understands the meaning of the meat of the tongue. And for me, I usually tell this story, Elisa, when I want to explain why we do need to listen to story and also to tell stories. And exactly for this, because the story are like food for us. And they will keep us in good shape, of course, mentally and physically, because here there is a metaphor, right? The queen and then the gardener's wife, they do represent a metaphor of well-being, no? To be given attention, to be given care, to be nurtured by stories and fantastic universe that stories can bring to our mind. Voila, so I think this is why we still need storytelling. We still need as well fairy tales, because they do represent this catalog of destinies that each of us can choose to give to the self.
Oh, that's a wonderful answer. And I love that you incorporated a story in your explanation of that. It's a great story. So I've just
Yeah,
got
it is.
one more question for you. So do you have some advice for emerging storytellers, some pieces of wisdom that you wish you'd known in the beginning, perhaps?
Wow, that's very challenging question. I don't know whether I do have wisdom, or maybe I've been very lucky actually with my storytelling trainers in Belgium. They've been always very generous. And I think, yes, maybe generosity is something that I always consider very important. The generosity to share stories uh, and to listen to story. I mean, to always try to give as much as we can through a story about ourselves, and not just the story as it is in a book, because we could read it, but having this possibility to transfer it verbally, it's quite it's a superpower, I think. And so it has to be used, I think, with generosity, but at the same time, protecting the stories, the value of the story. So always being cautious, not to manipulate the story for our own interest. So maybe are these two pieces of advices that I would like to share. And of course, to be exposed to different oral traditions and different ways of storytelling. There is not a way to storytelling. There are many ways, because again, each of us will bring his or her own experience and the culture where each of us has been living and growing. So to pay attention to the different ways. Like in Italy sometimes, but also in other contexts, there is this small debate between those practicing storytelling as a profession and those practicing it as a passion. For example, in my case, I do not live out of storytelling. I'm very honest on that. But I think that is a kind of not relevant separation, because those doing professionally, those doing not professionally, in a way are contributing to keeping storytelling alive and to continue spreading fairy tales. So again, this is just to go back to what I was saying before. Yes, to be exposed to different ways, those doing professionally, those not doing professionally, as long as it's done in an honest and fair way.
Well, that's wonderful advice. So how can people find you and hear your radio show, and find you on the World Wide Web?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to talk again about the radio storytelling show Diffusione Fiaba. So it goes live every Friday of the month, so the second and the fourth Friday of the month, 6 p.m. Central European Time. So it depends where you are sitting in the world. And then it is possible then to listen it live on the radio, which is called radiocavolo.org. Or otherwise, it is not possible to connect live, because, as I said, the time zone. It's possible to re-listen to the podcast on Spotify and Spreakers and many other podcast platforms. You just need to type Diffusione Fiaba. I don't know whether we can write this then in the
we'll
introduction.
put it in the show notes. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and then of course the Facebook is also available. There is a Diffusione Fiaba Facebook page with all the information on when the show is going to be broadcast, either live or in podcast.
Amazing. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really enjoyed your observations, and I think it's really exciting that you've got the Sicilian. It's like a niche area that you can just thrive in because you love it so much. And
thank you very much, Alisa, for this opportunity. I really also enjoyed to spend some time with you.
Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about storytelling and folktale, fairy tale, myth, legend, or personal tales, wonder tales, all sorts of stories, and the art of storytelling, and why we really need to continue using it today. You can find more information about me at alissacurtain.com or at Alissa Curtain Stories on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I hope that you can find your heart in storytelling.